My name is Marissa Hamilton, 32 years old. I never thought my life would come undone in the middle of a Sunday dinner. The kind of meal that's supposed to hold families together became the moment mine split wide open. I can still see my mother's face across the polished mahogany table, her lips drawn so tight they looked carved from stone, before she spat the words that detonated everything. Get out, and never come back. For a moment, silence fell like ash after an explosion. My fork clattered against the plate, the sound ringing louder than it should have. My father, Richard, stared at his wine glass, as if the swirl of red could provide instructions on how to stop his wife. My sister Elizabeth covered her mouth with her hand. My brother Justin, as usual, avoided the blast by pretending to focus on his buzzing phone. And me? I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor, and for once in my life, I didn't argue. I walked out. I'd heard those words before, of course. Get out was practically my mother's favorite punctuation in an argument. But this time, I believed her. This time, I wasn't coming back. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for the last 3 years I had been quietly paying their mortgage, $2,200 every month, pulled straight from my account. I had done it to protect them, to protect the house they worshipped as the family's crown jewel. And now she was throwing me out of the very place I had been secretly keeping afloat. When I closed the door behind me that night, my hands were trembling, but my mind was strangely calm. I thought, maybe this is freedom. Maybe it's finally over. Weeks passed. The quiet should have been a relief, but it was haunted. I would wake in my apartment at night, hearing my mother's voice like a phantom echo. Never come back. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I could cut them off. But when the phone finally rang, my father's name flashing across the screen, the knot in my chest returned like it had been waiting. I answered on the third ring. "Marissa," he said, his voice strained, but polite, as if we hadn't ended in disaster. Why did you stop paying the mortgage?" The question gutted me, though his tone was almost casual. It was the kind of tone he used when asking if I'd remembered to lock the back door, or if I'd filled up the gas tank before borrowing the car. He had no idea what he was really asking. I took a long breath, letting the silence stretch. My father's voice wavered on the other end. "The bank sent a notice," he added quickly. I don't understand. We thought we were fine. Then suddenly, we thought we were fine." That was my father in a sentence. Pretend hard enough, and maybe the cracks in the walls won't show. Pretend long enough, and maybe your daughter won't notice she's bleeding herself dry to keep the lights on. "Dad," I finally said, and my throat burned from the effort. "You'll figure it out." There was a pause, heavy as thunderclouds. I could almost picture him, sitting at the kitchen table with that hollow stare he'd adopted after losing his job. My mother probably pacing behind him, muttering about appearances, about shame, about what the neighbors would think if the Hamiltons couldn't keep their 5-bedroom colonial in the suburbs of Boston. "Marissa," he whispered, "please." But I couldn't give him what he wanted. Not anymore. My silence was my answer, and after a moment, he sighed and hung up. That call should have been the ending, but instead it was the beginning. Because behind my father's confusion, behind my mother's rage, there was a story stretching back decades, a story of expectations, sacrifices, resentments buried so deep they became the very soil we walked on. Growing up in the Hamilton household had been like living in a glass museum where every wrong step risked breaking something priceless. My mother, Gloria, had impossibly high standards, always shifting, always designed so I could never quite reach them. Richard, my father, played the peacemaker, the man who soothed the storms but never stopped them. And my siblings? They had escaped early, leaving me alone in the eye of the hurricane. Now, years later, those dynamics hadn't just survived, they had calcified. They had turned into unspoken rules that dictated how we lived, how we fought, how we hurt each other. And on that April evening, when my mother screamed for me to get out, it wasn't just a fight. It was the culmination of everything I had carried since childhood. I thought leaving that night would sever the chain. I thought I was done. But when the call came, when my father's voice cracked under the weight of the mortgage I had secretly carried, I realized the past doesn't let go so easily. And maybe I didn't want it to. Not yet. Looking back, maybe I should have told him right then. Maybe I should have confessed the truth, that every month, while my mother criticized my cooking, my clothes, my career, I was also quietly wiring over the money that kept their roof above their heads. That their house, the house where I had once scribbled height marks on the doorframe, the house where my father had taught me to ride a bike in the driveway, the house my mother bragged about at every church gathering, still existed because of me. But I couldn't, because telling him would mean facing the silence that would follow. The silence when my mother found a way to twist my sacrifice into selfishness. The silence when my father looked away, unable to defend me. So instead, I told him nothing. And in that nothing, the real story began to take shape. The night after his call, I found myself sitting in my apartment's kitchen with the lights off, staring at the stack of unpaid bills on my own counter. Not because I couldn't afford them. God knows I had lived modestly for years. But because every envelope felt like a reminder. I had been paying someone else's debts for so long that I had almost forgotten what my own life cost. Sophia, my best friend, noticed before I said a word. She always did. "Marissa," she said when she dropped by later that week, holding 2 bottles of wine, "you're pale. You're jittery. What's going on?" I shook my head. "Nothing, just work stress." She gave me a look sharp enough to cut. "Work stress doesn't make you flinch when your phone rings." Her words stuck, even after she left that night. Because she was right. Every time the phone lit up with my father's number, or worse, my mother's, my body tensed like I was bracing for impact, and I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. For the first time, I started to wonder if my mother's curse, that command to get out and never come back, might actually be a gift. If walking away, truly walking away, was the only way I could ever build a life of my own. But families have a way of dragging you back, even when you swear you're free. And I hadn't yet learned just how far mine would go. When I think back to my childhood, the memories are not soft focus photographs or warm family dinners. They are jagged edges, always sharp enough to cut. The Hamilton household was a place where every sound seemed louder than it should have been. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the squeak of shoes against polished floors, the sighs of disapproval that came like clockwork from my mother, Gloria. I remember walking on eggshells, every step measured, every word rehearsed before leaving my mouth. My siblings had figured out early how to escape. Justin, my older brother, fled to college at 18 and never really returned, his visits short and perfunctory. Elizabeth left 2 years later, following him like a shadow into freedom. That left me, the youngest, alone with my parents, bearing the full weight of my mother's scrutiny. From the earliest days, Gloria's expectations towered over me. Nothing was ever enough. If I brought home a report card with 5 A's and 1 B, she would tap her manicured nail against the B like it was a stain spreading across the page. Elizabeth never got lower than an A-, she'd remind me, her voice honeyed with disdain. What happened here? Did you not study enough? It didn't matter if I had studied until my eyes blurred, if I'd pushed myself past exhaustion. The B would become a monument to my failure. Justin had escaped her judgment by leaving, Elizabeth by outperforming. And me? I was left as her project, her canvas of endless correction. My mother had a way of dressing down not just my achievements, but my very self. When I was 12, she stood me in front of the mirror and tugged at the waistband of my jeans. "Those make you look heavier than you are. Why would you want to draw attention to that?" The words lodged like thorns under my skin. I learned to study my reflection not for beauty, but for flaws. I learned to hide behind baggy sweaters, to count every calorie, to rehearse excuses for why I wouldn't join an ice cream after school. Friends became another battleground. "That Olivia girl seems shallow," she would whisper after meeting one of them. "I don't like how she dresses." Or, "Do you think hanging around people like that makes you look better?" Her disapproval seeped into my friendships, making me wary of introducing anyone to her gaze. By high school, my social life was as curated as my wardrobe, nothing that might invite more of her criticism. The worst fights were always about my future. I loved numbers. I loved the way they told stories, the way they could reveal patterns and predict outcomes. Finance fascinated me in a way nothing else did. But when I told my mother I wanted to pursue it, she laughed. "Finance?" she scoffed, as though the word itself was absurd. "Women don't get taken seriously in that field. You should choose something practical, like nursing. That's stable. That's respectable." Her dismissal cut deeper than any critique of my appearance. It wasn't just about what I wanted to do, it was about who I was allowed to be. Secretly, I applied to business programs anyway. When the acceptance letter from Cornell arrived, I cried in the quiet of my lavender-painted bedroom. Tears of relief, of vindication, of something like freedom. But when I told her, she only pursed her lips. Cornell? That's fine, I suppose. I had hope for Harvard. Even my victories became failures under her microscope. If my mother was the storm, my father, Richard, was the man patching up the leaks with duct tape. He never stood up to her, not really. He just softened the blows after they landed. I remember nights when I'd sit on the edge of my bed, tears streaming down my face, and he'd slip quietly into the room. He'd pat my shoulder awkwardly and murmur, "She just wants the best for you, Marissa. She pushes because she cares." Even then, even as a child, I knew it wasn't true. Care doesn't sound like contempt. Love doesn't leave bruises on your spirit. But I clung to his words because they were the only comfort available. There were moments, rare and fleeting, when my mother could be warm. A laugh shared over a movie. A smile when I played piano well at a recital. A soft brush of my hair before a family portrait. But those moments were fragile, like glass ornaments that shattered if I breathed too hard. Mostly what I remember is the criticism. You slouch when you walk. Your hair would look better lighter. Elizabeth would never leave the house looking like that. Every word etched itself into me, shaping a voice that followed me long after I left that house. I grew up measuring myself against standards that shifted like quicksand. Success was never secure, love was always conditional, and approval was something dangled just out of reach. I told myself that if I worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, one day she would see me. One day she would stop comparing me to Elizabeth, stop belittling me in front of relatives, stop narrowing her eyes at every choice I made. One day, I thought, success would earn me love. But it didn't. It only deepened the cracks. Because when I finally found success, when I graduated with honors in finance, when I secured a job at a prestigious firm, when I moved into my own apartment in the city, her pride curdled into resentment. She didn't introduce me as her daughter, who managed portfolios worth millions. She introduced me as Marissa. She works with money, as though my career was a hobby she could barely explain. Every promotion I earned became another reminder to her of what she had given up. Every achievement of mine was a mirror reflecting her regrets. And slowly I began to see it. Her cruelty wasn't just about me, it was about her. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can hear the words she once muttered when she thought I wasn't listening. She thinks she's so special with her fancy job, Little Miss Perfect. I froze in the hallway that night, listening as my father sighed and told her I was just trying to help. And she had snapped back, "We were fine," before she started interfering. I should have known then, no matter what I did, no matter how much I sacrificed, I would always be the enemy in her story. But part of me couldn't stop hoping that if I kept giving, kept proving, kept showing up, she would finally give me the love I had been chasing since I was a child, standing in front of that mirror, tugging at her jeans in shame. That hope, that desperate longing for approval, would be the chain that held me to them for decades. And it would be the chain I would finally have to break, no matter how much it tore me apart. Adulthood was supposed to be freedom. That's what I told myself when I walked across the stage at Cornell, diploma in hand, the applause echoing like thunder in my chest. For the first time, I felt the world opening instead of closing. I landed a job at a prestigious financial management firm in Boston, straight out of school. At 28, I was already a senior advisor, guiding clients twice my age through investments, portfolios, and retirement strategies. My boss valued me. My clients trusted me. Numbers made sense in ways people never did. They told the truth if you knew how to read them. And yet, even as I built a life of my own in the city, every road still led back to that house. The colonial 5-bedroom with its manicured lawn and granite countertop kitchen wasn't just my parents' home, it was their kingdom. It was my mother's monument to a life she thought she deserved, her proof to the world that she had done everything right. When my father lost his job at 59 during a brutal company restructuring, the cracks began to show. For the first time, I saw him sitting at the kitchen table at night, his head in his hands, bills spread around him like a battlefield. I asked what was wrong, and he broke down. "We're 3 months behind on the mortgage," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "If we don't catch up soon, we'll lose the house." My chest tightened. I knew what losing that house would do to my mother. To her, it wasn't just property, it was identity. So the next day, without telling them, I called the mortgage company. I set up automatic payments from my account, $2,200 every month. It was a large portion of my salary, but I lived modestly. A small one-bedroom apartment, an aging Honda, no taste for luxury. I could afford it. And the thought of them losing their home, that was unbearable. For 3 years, I carried that burden in silence. Every time my card declined, at a boutique I couldn't really afford anyway, I reminded myself. It's because I'm saving their home. Every time I turned down a vacation with coworkers, every time I skipped buying a new dress for a friend's wedding, I whispered, "It's worth it. They'll never know, but it's worth it." But the irony was suffocating. The very house I was saving had always felt more like a prison than a home. The lavender walls of my old bedroom still bore the trophies of a girl who was never good enough. The dent in the living room wall, from when Justin had thrown a baseball indoors, remained a scar we never acknowledged. The height marks on the kitchen doorframe told the story of a family that looked perfect in photographs, but was breaking apart in silence. Every time I turned onto that street for one of my visits, a knot formed in my stomach. But I still went, because beneath all the resentment, I loved my father, and some foolish part of me still hoped my mother might soften. Instead, her barbs only grew sharper. When I brought homemade lasagna for dinner, her favorite, she poked at it with her fork and asked, "Did you use low-fat cheese? Because it tastes different, not in a good way." When I offered to help with dishes, she'd follow behind me, rewashing plates I'd already cleaned, sighing just loud enough for me to hear. Even when I tried to spoil her, cashmere scarves, first editions of novels she'd mentioned, spa days at luxury retreats, she found the flaw. The massage was too hard. My back will be bruised. That facial made my skin worse. Why are you being so nice? What do you want? Kindness in her eyes could only ever be a transaction. Sophia was the only person who knew the truth. One night, over glasses of red wine in my apartment, I told her everything. The mortgage payments, the constant criticism, the panic attacks before each visit. "Marissa," she said, her voice firm, "this is not normal. You are 32 years old, successful, brilliant, and you're bankrolling 2 people who don't even treat you with respect. That's not family, that's abuse." "They're my parents," I said weakly. "What am I supposed to do? Let them lose their house?" "Maybe they should," she countered, leaning forward. "Maybe they need to face reality. You're carrying them, Marissa, and they're not grateful. They're resentful. Where are your boundaries?" Her words hit me harder than my mother's ever did, because she was right. I had no boundaries. In my family, boundaries were treated as selfishness. My mother often quoted, "Honor thy father and mother," as if it meant, do as we say, no matter what it costs you. And I, terrified of being labeled ungrateful, obeyed. The stress began to seep into my body. The night before a family visit, my chest would tighten until I could barely breathe. My hands shook during client meetings. My therapist suggested limiting contact, but the guilt was overwhelming. What kind of daughter would I be if I abandoned them now? I didn't see it then, but every silent payment, every smile forced at Sunday dinner, every swallowed insult was slowly hollowing me out. And still my mother's resentment only grew. Each promotion at work, each financial milestone, each success was another barb in her pride. She had given up her own career in real estate to raise children, and now here I was, a living contradiction to everything she'd sacrificed. "Careers are nice," she would say with a tight smile, "but family is what matters in the end. No one lies on their deathbed wishing they had spent more time at the office." The irony was bitter. She seemed to despise her own family, yet preached about family's importance every chance she got. The final straw came 2 weeks before everything exploded. I stopped by unannounced, bringing takeout from their favorite Italian restaurant. I let myself in with the key they'd given me years ago. And then I heard her voice, sharp and venomous, from the kitchen. "She thinks she's so special with her fancy job and her fancy apartment," my mother hissed. "Little Miss Perfect. Does she think we don't see right through her?" "Gloria, please," my father said, his voice weary. "She's just trying to help." "We don't need her help," she snapped. "We were fine before she started interfering." I froze in the hallway, the paper bag of food heavy in my hands. My stomach twisted, my chest burned. For a long minute, I couldn't move. Then I backed out silently, setting the bag down on the porch without knocking. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, shaking too hard to drive. That night I called Sophia and cried until my throat was raw. Next time will be different, I whispered, though even I didn't believe it. Next time I'll stand up for myself. But the truth was, old habits die hard, and I didn't yet realize that the next time would change everything. My father's 60th birthday should have been a celebration. For weeks I had planned the perfect gift, a Rolex he had admired years ago, back when his career seemed untouchable and retirement was something he imagined with pride instead of fear. He had said once, in a wistful moment, maybe when I retire. When the layoffs came, when his career crumbled beneath him, I knew that dream was gone, but I wanted to give it back, even if only for a moment. I saved for months, cutting back on everything, meals out, new clothes, even small indulgences, until the watch was mine to give. That Saturday in April, I arrived at their house with an overnight bag and the blue gift box tucked carefully under my arm. From the moment I stepped inside, the air felt heavy. My mother greeted me with a stiff hug and immediately commented on my hair. "Oh, you cut it again," she said with a disappointed sigh. It was finally getting to a nice length. I smiled tightly and let it pass. Correcting her would only ignite a fight, and tonight was supposed to be about Dad. I had arranged dinner reservations at his favorite steakhouse, hoping to lift his spirits with something special. But when I mentioned it, my mother dismissed the idea with a wave of her hand. "I already made his favorite pot roast," she said. "No need to waste money at overpriced restaurants." And that was that. The table was set with the good china that only came out for holidays or when appearances demanded it. The pot roast was delicious. I had to admit that, but the conversation was stilted. I asked about neighbors, family friends, my father's garden. Each topic eventually circled back to complaints. Dad drank more than usual, 4 glasses of wine in quick succession, his smile fading with each pour. When the time for gifts finally came, I handed him the box with nervous anticipation. He opened it slowly, and when the watch gleamed in his hands, his expression transformed. His eyes widened, disbelief and joy spilling across his face. "Marissa," he whispered, I can't accept this. It's too much." "Of course you can," I insisted, my throat tight. "You deserve it, Dad. Happy birthday." For one brief second, I saw pure happiness on his face, but then my mother's expression hardened. "How much did that cost?" she asked sharply, her voice slicing through the moment. "Gloria," my father warned gently. She ignored him. "Must be nice to have so much disposable income while we're counting pennies for groceries." The words hit like a slap. Dad tried to smooth it over, changing the subject, but the damage was done. The evening crumbled into awkward silence. I went to bed early in my old room, texting Sophia. "Remind me why I do this to myself." Her reply came instantly. "Because you're a good person who loves your dad. Hang in there. Call if you need me." The next morning, I woke early and went downstairs to make coffee. The house was still, sunlight spilling through the blinds. As the coffee brewed, I heard their voices drifting from the study. The door cracked just enough for their words to carry. "We can't keep doing this, Gloria," my father said, his tone raw. "The credit cards are maxed out. Property taxes are due next month. We have to tell her." "Tell her what?" my mother snapped. "That we're failing? That's exactly what she wants. To swoop in and play savior." "That's not fair. She would help if she knew." "I'm not taking charity from my child," she spat. "We'll figure it out." "How?" he demanded. "I'm stocking shelves part-time. It's not enough. We're underwater." Their voices dropped then, but I didn't need the rest. My hands trembled around the mug. They were drowning, and I had been throwing them a lifeline for 3 years without them even knowing. And still, they resented me. When they joined me in the kitchen 20 minutes later, I had already decided. "Mom, Dad," I couldn't help overhearing, I began, my voice shaking. "I know things have been tight since Dad lost his job, and I want to help." My mother's face went white, then red. "You were eavesdropping?" "No, I was in the kitchen. Your voices carried." "Financial planning is what I do," I continued, forcing calm. "Let me help you create a budget, maybe refinancing options for the house." "So now we need your professional help," she cut in, her tone edged with venom. "You think we're incompetent?" "That's not what I said. You have all the answers, don't you? Little Miss Perfect with her fancy job and her fancy apartment. You have no idea what the real world is like." The unfairness of it knocked the air from my chest. I had worked for everything, through college, through loans, through sleepless nights and impossible standards. Nothing had been handed to me. "Mom, that's not true, and you know it," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "I've worked incredibly hard for everything I have. I'm just trying to help." "We don't need your help," she shouted. and we certainly don't need your judgment." "It's not judgment," I snapped back. "It's concern. Dad just said you're underwater. The property taxes are due. Your credit cards are maxed out. These are serious problems." "Problems that are none of your business," she hissed. "This is between your father and me." My father sat silently, staring into his coffee. The Rolex gleamed on his wrist, an ironic symbol of prosperity we all knew was an illusion. "Dad," I whispered, desperation leaking into my voice, "please say something." He looked up, eyes tired. "Your mother is upset, Marissa. Maybe we should discuss this another time." Something inside me snapped. "There won't be another time," I said, my voice shaking. "This pattern never changes. Mom attacks, you enable, and I'm supposed to absorb it because we're family. Well, I'm done." My mother shot to her feet, her chair tipping over. "How dare you speak to us like that in our own home?" "What exactly have you done for me, Mom?" I demanded, my hands trembling. "Made me feel inadequate at every turn? Criticized my appearance, my career, my life? Taken financial support without acknowledgement or gratitude?" Her face twisted. "Financial support? What are you talking about?" I almost stayed silent, but the words clawed their way out. "For the past 3 years," I said, each word heavy, "I've been paying your mortgage. Every month. $2,200. That house is still yours because of me." The room went deathly still. My father's face drained of color. My mother's mouth opened and closed, speechless for once in her life. Then, like ice cracking, her voice came back, colder than ever. "Get out," she whispered. "Gloria," my father started. "Get out!" She was shaking now, but her words were razor sharp. "If you think we're such burdens, if you think you're better than us, then go live your perfect little life, and don't come back." I looked at my father, begging him silently to stand up, to say something, anything. But he looked away, and in that moment I knew this wasn't just a fight. This was exile. I should have screamed. I should have begged. I should have fought for the truth. But when my mother's voice sliced through the room, cold, final, merciless, I felt nothing. "Get out and never come back." I moved like someone underwater. I climbed the stairs, packed my overnight bag with robotic precision, and walked back down past the photos lining the hallway. Christmas mornings, vacations, smiling faces that felt like lies now. My father stood there, helpless, his lips parted as if to speak. "Marissa, she doesn't mean it," he whispered. "Give her time to calm down." But she did mean it. For once, I chose to believe her. "She means every word," I said quietly, "and for once, I'm going to take her at her word." I closed the front door gently behind me. No slamming, no theatrics, just the soft click of an ending. The drive back to my apartment blurred into white noise. 40 minutes of highway, taillights streaking through my tears that refused to fall. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, my chest hollow. When I finally parked outside my building, I didn't move. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at the glow of my phone screen. Sophia's name pulsed with unread texts. "How's it going? Surviving? Want me to call?" I dialed before I could think, and when she answered, her voice was warm and steady. "Talk to me." "She told me to leave," I said, and then the dam broke. She told me to get out and never come back. The sobs came then, raw and unstoppable. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and cried until my throat ached. "Where are you right now?" Sophia asked. "In my car, outside my building." "Stay there, I'm coming." 20 minutes later, she slid into the passenger seat with a bottle of wine and a bag from the deli down the street. She pulled me into her arms. "First hug," she said firmly. "Then food, then wine, then we figure this out." And for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of safety. I spent the next 2 days on Sophia's couch, unable to be alone with the echo of my mother's words. She called in sick to work on Monday just to sit with me, refilling my tea, distracting me with movies, listening when I needed to vent. By Tuesday, I forced myself back into the office. I smiled for clients, spoke confidently in meetings, answered emails like nothing had happened, but inside I was unraveling. The calls from my father started almost immediately. I let them go to voicemail. His messages were vague. "Please call me back, Marissa. We need to talk." Not once did he apologize. Not once did he acknowledge what had happened. He simply wanted me, once again, to smooth things over, to be the bigger person. There were no calls from my mother. After 10 days of silence, I did something I hadn't dared before. I met with a colleague from work who specialized in personal financial planning. I laid out the numbers, 3 years of $2,200. Monthly payments, nearly $80,000, funneled into a house that wasn't mine. Legally, you have no obligation, she said gently. The mortgage is in their names. You're not a co-signer. What you've been doing is essentially gifting. What happens if I stop? I asked. They'll receive notices of non-payment. If they can't make the payments themselves, foreclosure proceedings could begin. My chest tightened. But that would mean they face the consequences of their own choices, she finished. The words lodged in me. I walked home that evening with the city lights blurring around me, repeating them in my head, their own choices. That night, I logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic payments. It was terrifying, liberating, like cutting a cord that had both tethered me and strangled me. With that money freed, for the first time, I could breathe financially. I started looking at condos, small houses, places that could be mine, not a temporary apartment, not a borrowed space, mine. 2 weeks later, I signed a deposit for a sunlit 2-bedroom condo in a converted Victorian. Bay windows, hardwood floors, a kitchen that smelled faintly of lemon from the previous owner's cleaning products. When I stood in that empty living room, keys in hand, the silence felt different. Not oppressive, not heavy with expectations. This was my home. No one could tell me to leave. No one could make me feel like an intruder. But even in my new space, the ghosts lingered. At night, panic attacks seized me. Chest tightening, breath shallow, as if I were still bracing for my mother's criticism. At work, my hands shook before presentations. The mask of competence stayed in place, but inside I was fraying. That was when I found Dr. Martinez. She was calm, direct, unflinching. In our first session, I spilled everything: childhood, comparisons, the mortgage, the birthday collapse, the exile. She listened quietly, then said words that changed me. What you are describing sounds like a lifetime of emotional abuse. Your mother exhibits narcissistic traits, and your father, while not malicious, has enabled her behavior by never confronting it. I shook my head, but she's not always terrible. Sometimes she can be kind when I do what she wants. That's part of the cycle, Dr. Martinez explained. Moments of kindness keep you hooked, make you believe change is possible, but the fundamental dynamic doesn't change. I thought of the lasagna she had criticized, the gifts she had dismissed, the spa day she had ruined. I thought of the Rolex on my father's wrist, gleaming while he sat silent. For the first time, I let myself consider. Maybe it wasn't me who was broken. The weeks after felt like detox. Every instinct screamed at me to call my father back, to check if they were all right, to rescue them again. Guilt coiled in my stomach like a snake. But Dr. Martinez's words echoed. Sometimes helping can hurt in the long run. So I stayed silent. I painted my new walls, teal and yellow, colors my mother would have hated. I bought furniture that pleased me, not anyone else. I created a home office where I planned my own future instead of patching theirs. Slowly, the panic attacks eased. Sleep came easier. For the first time in years, I woke without dread pressing on my chest. But beneath it all was a deep, aching grief. I had lost a family I never really had. Then, 3 weeks after I walked out of that house for the last time, my phone rang. My father's name lit up the screen. My stomach dropped. My hands trembled. I had been waiting for this call, dreading it, knowing it would come. I closed my eyes, drew a steadying breath, and answered. "Hello, Dad." "Marissa." His voice cracked with relief. "How are you, sweetheart?" As if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't been banished. As if love could be conjured with one casual word. I gripped the phone tighter, bracing myself, because I knew this was only the beginning. The sound of my father's voice on the phone felt both familiar and foreign. "Marissa," he said, his tone too casual, as if the last 3 weeks had been nothing but a minor misunderstanding. "How are you, sweetheart?" I stared at the ceiling of my condo, the teal paint glowing faintly in the afternoon light. I could feel my pulse in my throat. "I'm okay," I answered carefully. "How are you?" "Oh, getting by," he chuckled weakly. "We've missed you at Sunday dinners." I let the silence stretch. If he wanted to pretend, he would do it alone. "Your mother's been asking about you," he added, and I nearly laughed at the lie. My mother didn't ask about me unless it was to criticize. "Has she?" I said, voice flat. He cleared his throat. "Well, you know how she is. She has her pride, but I know she regrets what happened." "Did she say that?" A pause. "Not in those exact words, no, but I know she does." My chest tightened. Nothing had changed. He was still making excuses for her, still asking me to be the one who forgave without apology. "Dad," I said sharply, "why are you really calling?" He hesitated, and then the truth spilled out. "We got a notice from the bank. A late payment. Then another. They're threatening foreclosure if we don't catch up." The air in my condo went still. "I don't understand it," he rushed on. "The payments have always gone through automatically. For 3 years, they were always on time, but suddenly they're not." My grip tightened on the phone. My heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Have they?" I asked softly. "Yes," he said. "Ever since—" He trailed off, and I could hear the moment realization began to dawn. "Marissa, what did you mean that day when you said you'd been paying our mortgage?" I closed my eyes. The moment of truth had come. "I meant exactly what I said," I whispered. "For 3 years, I've been making your mortgage payments, $2,200 every month." There was a long, stunned silence. Then his voice, faint. That's not possible. We would have known." "Would you?" I asked. "The bank statement just shows the payment received. Did you ever check the source?" "I thought," his voice cracked, "I thought my freelance consulting was covering it. I told your mother I was keeping us afloat. I didn't know." The shame in his voice cut deeper than his ignorance. "Dad," I said gently, "it was me. $79,200. That's what I've given you, quietly, without thanks, without acknowledgement, while she tore me down at every turn." He sucked in a breath, like the weight of the number physically struck him. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Marissa, I had no idea." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to cry, but what came out was calm, flat, final. "It's over, Dad. I've stopped the payments." His silence on the other end felt endless. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. "But the house—" "The house is not my responsibility," I said, steel in my tone. "It never was." "You don't understand. Your mother—" "Your mother," I snapped, "has had 3 years of my salary keeping her in that house, and still she told me to get out. Still she called me ungrateful. Still you stood there and said nothing." The words poured out, unrestrained, decades of swallowed hurt rising like a flood. "I canceled the payments the day I left. If you can't afford the mortgage, you need to sell, or get jobs that cover your expenses, or downsize. I can help you plan if you're willing to listen, but I will not bankroll her pride anymore." On the other end, my father's breathing was ragged. "There's no shame in honest work, Dad," I added quietly. "The shame is in pretending everything is fine while your daughter burns herself out saving you." For a moment, he didn't reply. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "What you've done for us—" He broke off, swallowed hard. "I don't know what to say. I feel ashamed, Marissa, deeply ashamed." I closed my eyes, my throat tight. "I didn't do it to shame you. I did it because I loved you. But love doesn't mean destroying myself for you." "I understand," he said, though I wasn't sure he did. There was another pause, then a question, tentative, fragile. "Could we meet? Talk about this in person?" I hesitated. The thought of seeing either of them made my stomach clench. But maybe face-to-face, boundaries could be drawn more clearly. "Not at the house," I said firmly. "I'll meet you at Riverside Cafe on Thursday. Noon. Just you, not Mom. I'm not ready to see her." Relief flooded his voice. "Of course, just me. Thank you." After we hung up, I sat at my desk, hands shaking. I had finally told the truth, and the world hadn't ended. Thursday came too quickly. I arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a table in the back where I could see the door. My heart pounded with every sip of coffee. At exactly noon, my father walked in. He looked older than I remembered, shoulders hunched, face gaunt, the Rolex conspicuously absent from his wrist. "Marissa," he said with visible relief, as if afraid I wouldn't show, "thank you for meeting me." I nodded and gestured to the chair across from me. We ordered coffee. The silence between us stretched until the server walked away. "I want to start," he said, voice trembling, "by apologizing. Not just for that day, but for years. For not protecting you from your mother's anger, for letting you become her target, for taking your support without acknowledgement." The words startled me. He had never been this direct, this honest. "Thank you for saying that," I managed, my throat thick. He looked down at his hands, twisting the coffee cup. "After we spoke on the phone, I checked the bank records. I saw the truth. For 3 years, you've been carrying us while I pretended everything was fine. I feel ashamed." I reached across the table, though I stopped short of touching his hand. "Dad, I didn't tell you to make you feel ashamed. I did it because I wanted to help. but I can't anymore. I won't." "I know," he whispered, "and I don't blame you, but your mother, she doesn't believe it. She thinks I'm making it up. She thinks I'm trying to turn her against you." Of course she did. I had to show her the bank statements, he continued. The account number, the dates, everything. And Marissa, she cried. The admission stunned me. My mother crying, I couldn't picture it. "She hasn't cried in years," he said softly. "Not since her father died. But when she realized what you had done, she broke." I didn't know what to feel. Vindicated? Angry? Sad? Before I could answer, my father glanced toward the cafe door. His shoulders stiffened. "I asked her to come," he admitted. My stomach dropped. "You what?" "She wants to apologize," he said quickly. "Please just hear her out." The door opened, and there she was. Gloria, my mother. For the first time, she looked small, and I realized I wasn't ready. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and the air seemed to thicken. My mother walked in, scanning the room until her eyes landed on us. For the first time in my life, she looked diminished. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, strands of gray showing. No jewelry, no designer scarf. She wore a plain blouse, the kind of outfit that wouldn't turn heads in a grocery store. I felt my jaw tighten. "You ambushed me," I hissed at my father, my voice low. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought it would be better this way." Better? To corner me with the one person I wasn't ready to face? My mother approached the table slowly, as if testing the floorboards. She stopped at the edge, her hands clasped together, her knuckles white. "Hello, Marissa," she said softly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was too tight. "May I sit?" she asked. Every instinct screamed no. But causing a scene in the middle of a crowded cafe would only hand her control. "Fine," I muttered. She slid into the chair across from me, perching on the edge like she might bolt at any second. The silence between us was suffocating until the server returned for her order. "Just water," she said, her voice barely audible. When we were alone again, she took a long breath. "Your father showed me the bank records, the mortgage payments." I kept my face neutral. "And?" Her hands trembled as she twisted her napkin. "I didn't know. I thought we were managing. I thought your father's work was enough. I had no idea you were the one keeping us afloat." "And would it have mattered if you did?" I asked, my voice cold. "Would you have treated me any better?" Her eyes widened. For once, she didn't have a retort ready. I don't know," she admitted. "I'd like to think so." Honesty, unexpected, but not enough. "Well, now you do know," I said flatly, "and it doesn't change a thing, because it's over." "Yes," she whispered, "I know." She hesitated, then forced the words out. "The bank has given us 30 days. If we don't catch up, they'll start foreclosure." I leaned back, arms crossed. "That's not my problem anymore." She flinched at my bluntness, but to my surprise, she nodded. "No, it's not." My father looked at me hopefully, as if this admission might melt the ice. We're looking at options," she continued. "Richard's applied for better-paying jobs. I have an interview tomorrow at a real estate office, receptionist position." I stared at her, stunned. My mother hadn't worked since before I was born. "That's a start," I said carefully, "but it won't be enough to keep the house." Her shoulders slumped. "We know. We've contacted a realtor. She's coming next week to assess the property." I glanced at my father, who nodded in confirmation. "It's the only sensible option," he admitted. "We should have done it years ago." "Yes," I said sharply. "You should have." My mother's fingers twisted tighter around the napkin. "Marissa, I know an apology isn't enough, but I need to say it anyway. What I said to you that day, and so many days before it, there's no excuse." "No," I said, "there isn't." Tears welled in her eyes and her voice broke. "I was cruel to you. I've been cruel for years. I told myself it was for your own good, that I was pushing you to be your best, but the truth is—" She paused, trembling. "The truth is, I was jealous." The admission stunned me. Jealous? "I gave up my career to raise you kids," she said, staring down at her hands. "It's what women of my generation were expected to do. I don't regret having you, but I regret losing myself in the process. And when you became so successful, so independent, doing everything I'd given up, criticizing you was easier than admitting my own regrets." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. My mother, the woman who had never once admitted fault, was confessing envy. Part of me wanted to lean across the table, to embrace this fragile crack in her armor. But the wiser part, the one shaped by Dr. Martinez's steady guidance, knew better. One moment of honesty, didn't erase decades of damage. I appreciate your honesty, I said finally, but I need you to understand something. Our relationship cannot go back to what it was. I will not be your punching bag anymore. I will not sacrifice my financial security for your comfort, and I will not accept criticism disguised as concern. Her chin trembled. I understand. Do you? I pressed. Because these are non-negotiable boundaries. If you can't respect them, we won't have a relationship at all. My father reached across the table, as if to take my hand, but I pulled back. We want to do better, he said quickly. Both of us. We want to rebuild, if you'll give us that chance. I looked at them, these two flawed, frightened people who had raised me in fear and criticism, who had taken so much without giving back. I can't promise anything right now, I said. I'm still processing a lifetime of hurt. I need time. I need space. Of course, my father said, relief flooding his voice. And another thing, I added, my voice firm. I want you both in therapy, individually and as a couple. There are issues here that go beyond money. My mother's mouth tightened reflexively, but to my surprise, she nodded. If that's what it takes. It's a start, I said. As for the house, my father began, but I cut him off. I'm not resuming payments, that's final, but I'll help you make a plan. Downsizing, budgeting, job searches, retirement options. That's what I can offer. Nothing more. My father's eyes softened. That's more than we deserve. It's not about deserving, I said. It's about what I'm willing to give while protecting myself. We sat there another hour, talking practically. House values, resumes, job listings. For once, there were no guilt trips, no manipulation. Just adults, finally forced to face reality. When we stood to leave, my mother hesitated. Would it be all right if I called you? Just to check in? Text first, I said. Ask if I have time. Respect if I say not right now. She swallowed and nodded. I will. We parted without hugs or promises, just a tentative acknowledgement that something new might be possible, even if the old was gone forever. As I walked out of the cafe, sunlight spilled across the street. I breathed in deeply, the air sharp in my lungs. Not healed, not whole, but finally moving in the right direction. 6 months can change almost everything. The condo that once echoed with emptiness now feels alive. I painted the living room wall a bold teal, the kitchen a bright yellow that soaks up the morning sun. I planted herbs on the small balcony, their scent of basil and rosemary greeting me every time I opened the sliding door. And then there was Leo, the orange tabby I adopted from the shelter. He greets me at the door each evening, dignified and demanding, curling against me at night like he knows he's stitching the broken parts of me back together. Work has flourished in ways I never expected. Without the constant drain of family drama, I've had energy to be creative again, to dive deeper into strategies for my clients. My boss promoted me to senior advisor with my own team. I should have felt pride, but what I felt was lighter, like I was finally living my own life instead of performing someone else's script. Therapy with Dr. Martinez has been my anchor. At first, the sessions were raw, every wound peeled back until I thought I couldn't bear it. But week by week, we rebuilt. The panic attacks stopped. The nightmares faded. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head before calling my father. I stopped flinching at the thought of my mother's voice. You've done remarkable work, Dr. Martinez told me one afternoon. Many people spend decades trying to break free from toxic patterns. You've not just survived, you've transformed. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like finally being allowed to breathe. And what about them, Gloria and Richard? They did sell the house. The sprawling colonial with its perfect lawn and granite kitchen went to another family, a younger couple with small children who would fill the hallways with laughter instead of criticism. My parents bought a modest townhouse closer to the city, 2 bedrooms, far less space but far more manageable. To my surprise, my mother didn't crumble. At 63, she began working again, starting as a receptionist in a real estate office. Within 3 months, she had streamlined their processes so efficiently that the company offered to sponsor her license. The younger agents asked me for advice, she said during one of our tentative Sunday phone calls. They say clients trust me because I have life experience. There was something in her voice I had never heard before. Pride. Earned, not manufactured. My father, too, seemed lighter. He found a job as a sales manager at a smaller firm, making less than before, but without the crushing pressure. We don't miss the big house as much as we thought we would, he told me over lunch. All those rooms we never used. All that stuff we never needed. It feels good to simplify. For the first time, I believed him. But the most shocking change came from my mother. She began therapy. Not because I demanded it, because she wanted it. She told me she broke down at work one day when a client came in with her young daughter. "I suddenly saw us," she said, voice shaking. "You and me, back when you were little, before I ruined things." Her therapist diagnosed her with narcissistic tendencies rooted in her own childhood trauma, patterns she had carried forward unknowingly into motherhood. She began calling me after difficult sessions, apologizing for moments I had long buried, the jeans she mocked when I was 12, the bee she turned into failure, the lasagna she spat out with disdain. I accepted her apologies cautiously, not rushing to forgive, not clinging to anger. Dr. Martinez reminded me, forgiveness is a process, not a single act. It's for my peace, not her absolution. Our relationship is not healed, not in the way I once dreamed, but it's honest. And honesty, I've learned, is worth more than perfection. Boundaries have become my lifeline. I visit them once a month in their townhouse. We speak on the phone weekly, but I end calls if the conversation turns critical or draining. I no longer say yes to everything. I no longer feel responsible for their happiness. It's strange. Now that I'm not carrying them, they've learned to stand. The irony, my father said once with a rueful smile, is that when you stopped saving us, we started saving ourselves. It's been good for us. He was right. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrificing everything. It's allowing others the dignity of facing reality. Last Christmas was different. The year before, we had sat in the grand dining room of the old house, expensive gifts piled high, smiles plastered on for the sake of photographs. This year, we crowded into their smaller townhouse, eating homemade stew at a worn oak table. There were no illusions, no grandeur, just conversation that was, for once, genuine. I looked at my parents across that modest table and thought, we are not the family I once wished for, but maybe we can be something else, something real. One evening, over dinner with Sophia in my condo, I tried to put it into words. What I've learned, I told her, is that standing up for myself didn't destroy my family. It transformed it. By refusing to keep paying the mortgage, I gave them the chance to grow, and I gave myself permission to live. She raised her glass. You gave them the gift of reality, and you gave yourself freedom. I smiled, Leo curling at my feet. Exactly. As summer shifted to autumn, I realized something profound. Success isn't measured in promotions or possessions. It's measured in peace, in boundaries, in relationships built on respect, not obligation. And sometimes the strongest families aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones that shatter and then choose to rebuild differently. My story isn't tied with a bow. My mother still slips sometimes. My father still avoids confrontation. And I still feel the tug of old guilt when I set boundaries. But I've learned to live with the mess, to see beauty in imperfection. And I hope that anyone trapped in the same cycle can hear this. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. Loving your family doesn't mean burning yourself to keep them warm. You can honor them and still honor yourself. Sometimes stepping back is the very thing that allows them to step up. Sometimes the deepest healing comes after the most painful truths. And sometimes the life you deserve only begins the moment you finally walk away.